the growth of MMA and specifically the UFC. Now I understand that, of course, because there's this one very dominant organization, the UFC. Close second is Bellator. That they have all the best fighters under their wing. It makes it easier to make those big, massive fights. Seems like they're coming every month. These huge fights. And politics in boxing just completely gets in the way of making those huge fights, and it goes at the cost of an audience. I feel like the boxing audience is older, and I feel like the younger kids are a lot less into it now. But how would you? I was gonna ask this later, but let's go for it now. I was gonna say, if I give you like Dana White kind of money, and you've been in the business for such a long time, so you have an understanding of where it's going wrong, I suppose. But you had the condition to, with that money, bring boxing up to par with MMA.
Yeah.
What is your first order of business?
To organize the fighters, either an association or a union, get them all on the same path. Education, is to give these fighters. That's an excellent question. Excellent question, and these are things that for the longest time have been talked about, but nobody's really taken that step forward. But education is number one. I 20 years ago, when I've been in Las Vegas like 26 years ago, I put a documentary together called Boxer's Nightmare, and it deals with all the headaches that the fighters go through, right?
Yeah.
And but real quick, I interviewed Mike Tyson, one of the guys in the video, and a week before he got his tattoo. And I said, Mike, every fighter has that one little thing that nobody in the planet has. What's that one little thing that it takes to be a fighter? And very simply, Mike Tyson says, take the pain. You have to take the pain. And as I broke it down, he was so true, because it's pain in training. There's pain in the fights. There's pain with your family. There's pain financially. So it's not a bed of roses. So how can we make it better? The whole thing has always been is, let's get these guys organized through some association and give them something to, let's say, they go to this website. The website will tell you, for management, how are you going to pick a manager? Well, the rules say that a manager cannot get more than 33 1/3%. But a lot of these managers will tell the fighters that are naive that I'll be your manager, but it's going to cost you 33 1/3%. So I can understand if a fighter is paying a manager 33 1/3%, if that manager is subsidizing this fighter's career until he makes the money.
Right.
That I understand. But if you, as an agent or as a manager, just make a phone call and get this guy some fights, you're not entitled to 33 1/3%. That's an overkill. You're entitled to 10 or 15%.
Yeah.
So I always, why not? That's the fees of an agent. And if you're just going to make a phone call, you're an agent. If you're going to supply this guy with income and support him all the way through his career, then you're entitled to that. You make your money on the long run. So that's one of the things. Health issues for these guys. They're the bare knuckle fighting championships now are creating here in the States. It's a new sport.
Yeah.
Old sport, but it came back. But they're creating a pension plan, and it's the first time it's ever been done ever. So there's a lot of improvements. I always say fighters in all combat sports, they're all modern day gladiators, and that's how they're being treated as gladiators and as racehorses. And so that's how I would start putting a program together if I had all this money together. So, is you got to help them, but education is number one.
It is mostly financial.
Yeah.
I mean, I have another theory. Well, it's not a theory, but what they see, the media side of things. I don't know, if you make these huge fights happen, of course, obviously, naturally, people will be drawn to it more. If I show because when I show MMA fans who aren't really into boxing, show them some of the great fights there, they're baffled at the level of the hands and how much better it is actually than MMA fighters have. Yeah. So there has to be a way to promote these smaller fighters and these personalities, to come out. The organizations, the networks behind them have to really start promoting them instead of only focusing on those champions and those big names, I think. But I just don't know how you're going to go about it if these smaller fighters, characters, also aren't fighting each other, because of the politics, because of all that. So, tricky situation.
Yeah, I know, I understand that, and you know, one of the good things about me is I worked corporate America for 23 years, so I understand a lot of the business aspect of what it takes to run a business.
Mhm.
And these promoters and these networks and all that, for them, it's a business.
Yeah.
You know, they're all these fighters are all numbers. How are we going to maximize our numbers with this personality? Why would we invest X amount of money on you that's just up and coming when nobody knows who you are and you're not going to sell
Mhm.
no tickets? And you know, at this point, that's why it's important for you to learn how to market yourself. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So
True.
so that's the hard part of the game. I remember with the UFC when I first started, there was like 15 members, people on staff. And you know, the old thing is, you know, Dana, when we make money, you make money. You know, uh, and at that point we were names, and then as they got bigger and bigger, everybody became numbers, and that's part of the corporate structure.
Yeah.
So that I understand.
Yeah, there are definitely there are drawbacks in that sense. Because that's what I was explaining to my casual friend the other day. When I look at the fight purses in UFC, like of course the top fighters make nothing, a fraction of what the boxing names make, you know. But overall, if you look at the mid tier, I suppose, and then the lower tier, absolutely the MMA fighters are making more.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
even then, uh, these people on the roster are still making nothing actually,
no,
for
I
especially
agree.
for the damage they're taking.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's why, you know, in MMA, they've been trying to put Randy Couture, Vanderlei Silva, Leslie Smith, all these people have been trying to get unions, associations.
Yeah,
But here's where the problem lies, Nick, is you are a fighter that's coming into the UFC. You know, it's the best to be at the UFC. That I understand, but you're thinking of yourself instead of thinking of the long run of other people's careers. You know, how
yeah,
can you build this program? We as a team. So
hmm
everybody, as they are independent contractors, also look at it that way. That you know, I got to take care of myself before I take care of a group, and that's why it's important to have a strong organization that will give these guys an incentive to work together as an association. And
yeah,
then that way you could go on and negotiate. And you're right, these guys that are the main eventers are getting peanuts compared to what boxing is getting. And you see the profit margins, the difference, the percentage that the UFC gives these guys opposed to what boxing gives these guys. It's a big discrepancy. So that needs to be
yeah.
improved.
I feel the big thing is also that in boxing it's personality based. It's the individual who's
Yeah.
being promoted and marketed, and they are the face. If they leave, the organization can be dead. Certain names. Was Tyson Fury's with his Top Rank,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
And let me add real quick with this, you know, the problem with not having an association of people
Mm.
to back you up. George St. Pierre, during these YouTubers, was going to fight Oscar De La Hoya,
Yes.
right? He's been retired for the most part, but he's still in contract with the
Yeah.
UFC. So Dana says he can't fight, which is bullshit. You know,
Yeah. It
it's an
is.
exhibition. It gives him an opportunity to stay in the light. It makes the UFC look good. You know, George makes a little bit of money. What's the problem with that?
Do you
You
think
know?
Dana? I think Dana is still hung up on the fact he's just wishful thinking that Khabib comes back and he can make that fight happen. Maybe
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
thing. But still, I agree with you. Here it was so yeah, exactly what I was getting at is the UFC has done it. It has promoted themselves to the point that it's the organization that people are looking at, not necessarily the names, because there are so many. That explains why John Jones, even Dana stated. I don't know if he literally said this. Don't quote me, but he said you're not that important to us. And this
yeah.
is the best fight, or at least he has the best record. Well, aside from best active fighter, best record there is,
Hey,
and
well, he
everybody
also
wants to see him
says
fight Francis. So, yeah,
he also said Stitch and I were not friends. So, you know, welcome
yeah,
to
yeah,
the
yeah.
welcome to the world. And real quick before you talk about Tyson Fury, I was doing a Top Rank show, and Luis, I can't remember his last name, one of
Mhm.
the top Brazilian trainers, works with Anderson Silva and all these guys. He had a boxer, and I hadn't seen him in a long time. And during lunch, he comes up to me, he says, Stitch, he goes, we, the coaches, the fighters, we want to thank you for speaking up because we could not, you
Yeah.
know, and I thought that was very the best comment I've gotten from anybody.
Oh,
You
I
know,
have gotten some
this is years
for you as
later.
well from fighters as well. Spoke
Yeah,
to a couple of fighters who saw you were coming on and said, you know, well, they knew we were going to talk about this as well. And they were just really thankful. They're like, "Oh, such a cool dude." It's a shame what happened. There's a lot of love coming your way from them. So, and I understand it sucks because they can't speak out. Of course, they can't.
Right. Yeah,
You
no,
know,
exactly.
yeah. So, what happened? So, okay, I know how you go. Well, explain actually. How did you meet Dana White? How did you get the job first, and then what happened?
All right, so you want to start from square one? Yeah, I knew Dana in the gyms. He was saying he was in boxing, but he was doing hand pads for executives and for the wives, and I don't think I ever saw Dana work a corner. In all
Yeah.
fairness, right? But I was in there training, working with fighters and all that, so I knew Dana, and in all fairness, he was friends with Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta that bought the UFC, and but I was doing a K1 at the Bellagio. I think Bob Sapp was fighting Chemo and Dana was in the audience, and he said, "Hey man, give me your card." So next day he calls and said, "Look, we bought the UFC and want to know if you're interested in being a Cutman." At
Wow.
that time, it was
Yeah.
only Leon Tats, which was the original veteran Cutman from UFC #1. They brought him on board,
Hmm.
but and I got to give Dana credit, Nick, for that. He saw the vision that MMA was such a new sport. The coaches didn't know how to wrap hands. They
Hmm.
didn't know how to work cuts. So they brought in Leon and myself, boxing people, right? So that I got to give him credit for. And he did change my life in that. So we put that program together, the one that everybody uses now. And eventually we brought in 5 guys per show. It was that busy because everybody wanted me to wrap their hands. I couldn't do everybody's hands, right?
Yeah.
Stitch, can you wrap my hands? And Stitch, can you? I do 7, 8 guys in one night, right? So finally, we brought in
Yeah.
Don House, and so anyway, that program we put together, and it was good, and then we were working on sponsors. Everybody was working on sponsors. Fighters were making
Yeah.
50, 100,000 a fight. They were making more money through sponsors than they were through the fights. I was making more money through my sponsors than I needed the UFC to get money from my sponsors. And for the most part, we were getting paid probably less than the Green Girls, but nonetheless,
It
but
was, yeah.
I
There
would
was
get a
yeah.
sponsor. Let's say I get Bad Boy or Zions, then I would negotiate for the Don House and Leon Tabs and get them sponsorship. So I
Hmm.
was always the leader, and they took the sponsors away from everybody. Of course, you know that, and everybody's effing Dana, effing UFC, effing Reebok, and
So that's when Reebok came in. As soon as Reebok came in, it was it was finished.
yeah, it was all exclusive.
Yeah.
So they took everything away from everybody.
So that would be
And
fine if Reebok was paying their fighters adequately.
adequate. Yeah, yeah. The key word was adequately.
Yeah.
If let's say you had 20 fights total and 3 in the UFC, you only got $2,500.
Yeah.
Which is embarrassing. But they got all the Cutmen together and they told us that uh, you know couldn't use no sponsors. So I always, of course, I tried to negotiate a little bit more income,
Yeah.
and there was no money in the kitty, and so we left. And I thought, I can't depend on this, but through all this, John Nash from Bloody Elbow, I don't know him, never met him, called me and asked if I'd be interested in doing an interview on how the Reebok deal affected the Cutman. Well, me going back as a farm worker, my parents were fighting for our rights then as fair practices. And uh, I thought about my parents and growing up as a farm worker. I said, if I don't speak up, they wouldn't be proud of me. So I did.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
the article was, being that I was in corporate America, I knew how to present things in the article. I mean, I did like 57 interviews after they let me go. Camera crews come to my house, but a lot of the journalists said, I read the article and you said nothing wrong. No, I didn't, but it was just I just threw gas on the flame.
Yeah.
And my friends called me. We were at Costco. My wife and I were at Costco, and they asked if we could talk, and I knew what it was because I'm getting shitload of messages and positivity and thank you and this and that, and I get home and the only thing they say is, in fact, I just saw him Saturday at the fights, Mark. Uh, the only thing Mark said, his voice is cracking, is because we're all friends, right?
Yeah.
He says, because of the interview you did about Reebok, the UFC is not going to use you no more. And boom, I said, okay. And I didn't want to bust him because he's my friend. And I said, all right, you do me a favor. You tell Dana, I said, he ain't got no balls, that he should have called me personally since he's the one that brought me in. So that was big. Boom. And
Yeah.
and the first message that I read after I hang up is this guy now, I know it's David Estrada. But I responded back to him. I said, look, I want you to be the first to know. UFC let me go for speaking out about the Reebok deal and got to find a new job. And that went viral, bro. And I told you I did 57 interviews in a week. Camera crews come to my house. And then the dust started settling. And 2 weeks later, the UFC has their first big show on Fox Network. And Kevin Bryant is interviewing Dana. And well, what about Stitch Duran? Is Stitch ever coming back? And nah, you know, Stitch and I were never friends. And this and that. And if he were friends, he should have called him. That whole bullshit, right? And that that blew up in his face. And it turned out to be to my advantage.
Yeah. Well, it is. It would be, well, yeah, I was wondering how other organizations can keep up then with the UFC, because there needs to be, because look, Bellator, you can get your own sponsors, and I think, am I right in saying on average, the big names in Bellator will be making more money than, well, not let's not say champions top 5, but the other ranked opponents, the top 10s, will be making more than UFC fighters, including sponsorships in there.
Yes, of course.
Outside of, let's say, the top 5s in every division.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Sponsor money is nice money, bro. I'm telling you. You know, I needed the UFC to make my money through sponsors. And
so, do you see? Let's say I keep bringing up Bellator because they're the maybe the second most popular organization. I wouldn't want to say biggest because I think One Championship might be bigger. Do you see them competing? Would it be possible for them to be on the same level, and that would force UFC to make these changes?
You're talking about Bellator being at the same level?
Yeah, Bellator becoming at the same level in terms of viewership, influence. Yeah, I see them growing. I see them definitely growing a lot more this year, especially.
Well, you know what's happening, which really is, I think, is a good thing, because in all fairness, I don't know very many of the fighters in the UFC now. You know, they're like you were saying, it's about the UFC. It's not about promoting the fighters. Yeah. So you don't get that. Those fighters aren't getting the exposure like they did before. But a lot of these guys that were top names in UFC now are going to Bellator. So that's bringing a lot more eyes and attention, because they were always fan favorites. You know, Shogun, Lyoto, and all these guys, you know. You know, but will they ever get there? I think that, I don't know if they have the support that they do. The UFC does a great program, and they do a great job, and that I can give them credit for. Yeah. You know, when it comes to business, they are the best at what they do.
Yeah. But that also comes at the cost of, you know, fighter pay as well.
Sure.
Yeah. Well,
but if you're a corporate man, then you would consider that a success.
Absolutely.
But if you were a fighter, you would consider that as an insult. So,
well, a lot of the people on the inside, they always say that the Fertittas are the brains behind the organization. But how big of a role do you think Dana White it plays in the success of UFC, and what role does he play?
Well, for the face, definitely the face is him. You know, but the ones that are pulling the strings are Frank and Lorenzo. And like say, I understand corporate America, because what the Fertittas do, they own like 15, 18 casinos, right? And when their father retired, they gave them one. From there, they expanded. And they do a great job when it comes to running companies. But they are non-union. See, the thing there, all their casinos are non-union, which means that same pattern that they use for the casinos is the same formula that they use in the UFC. So where they're all numbers now.
Yeah, it's all numbers.
Yeah. I mean, that's the process. And did Dana have anything on the business aspect to do with it? Probably not. He's the face. He's the voice. You know. You know. And so
I don't know how to do it. I wouldn't mess with fighters too much if I was in his shoes. Like.
But Lorenzo and Frank are the brains by any means. By all means.
Yeah.
And sharp guys. I got to give them credit for that.
To be expected. Yeah. So what did you? So the Backlash game. You had to rethink what you were gonna do. What happened after you left UFC?
Everything happened, man. My life exploded. You know,
because you have your brand, right? You also have your wraps and everything, correct? Is it? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I had those during the UFC. You know, when I was using. I remember I was in Brazil one time. I had my stitch tape, right, and the KO swell, and those are available at Cutman for hire supplies. It's Juan Ramirez handles my stuff. But for the longest, the Cutman, they were using my tape. And I remember we were in Brazil, and Mike Mersch, one of the attorneys, comes to the dressing room and he said, "What the F are you doing with that tape?" I looked at him, I said, "What are you talking about? I've been doing this for 3 months." "Well, you got to cover it up." Next thing I know, they have their own UFC tape, right?
Oh
And I
my
said,
goodness, yeah.
but that's the way it was,
God
And
damn.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's the way they just dominate everything.
That
Uh,
makes sense though from them, of course. Now I realize, true, it is a sponsorship,
sure.
essentially.
Well, and
Promoting.
it's funny because when I started working with sponsors, on my gloves, I would put the sticker of Zions right here, right? I put my gloves on, and then I'd make stickers, peel them off, and I put them there, and it became because my hands are always here.
Yeah.
So one of the attorneys says I couldn't do that no more, and I asked him why. He says because it became prime position, and
Right.
they
Yeah.
made me take it off, and shortly after that, they put the UFC on the gloves and all that. So a lot of that came from my ideas in marketing, but that's what I've done. So yeah, but it's but I
Well,
got a lot of calls from I did Rising when they did their first comeback show and like say Bellator had offers from all over the world. I didn't want to lock down with a group at that time because I wanted to see different
mhm.
programs and different organizations and see if I could improve them or help them and all that. But then Bellator, Scott gave me a good offer and as friends, we worked together and that took me to a different level. And movies, got calls to do movies, and
That was
uh,
after. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was after, and so
So
yeah,
it
so
really was. You think it was that media attention from you speaking out that really catapulted your career even further? Because
yeah,
because you were in the media and
yeah, of course, and doing the
yeah,
right things. That was
that
the
is a
thing,
fact.
and I mean, like when I did the first Creed movie, right? I go to the premiere. My wife and I go to the premiere, and then we go to the after movie party. Wesley Snipes comes up to me and shakes my hand and says, "Hey, the UFC did you wrong." I said, "Wow, that's Snoop Dogg. I did the
Awesome.
last trailer. Snoop Dogg. Hey, man, you know, UFC. You're OG, man. Can I
Yeah.
take a picture with you?
Oh, that's
You know."
yeah.
So yeah, so it did change my life.